our primary objective on the real side, as it is on the physical, is to share the opportunity of the real universes of the true reality, the is, promote the real guides, and provide the sound connection to the all is, that being the new you song. A standard, then, that as individuals enter our experiences, or us theirs, on the real side, irrespective of their intentions, or even their actions, should they choose to be abrasive, etc., even if the situation dictates that sharing references isn't very feasible. If we are trying not to be eaten by a monster, we are unlikely to find a moment to hold its jaws at bay and divulge is pertaining references to it, for example. But that they encroach on our experience will still be an opportunity, as that which we are presenting, the true reality, will in some way impact them, if only subconsciously. You can't enter the experience of, say, a wrestler without something of the life of a wrestler becoming known to you. And so, regardless of the situation, we do endeavour to feature ourselves into the presence of others, and are open to those entering our experiences also, even if their intentions are malign. This real side experience would begin where I was attempting to engage with a woman. She appeared human, but real awareness impressions revealed she was an individual of a tremendous influence and reach. And with such individuals, if we can bring them on board, if they step up and agree to present the ears, they can be great assets. For just like individuals that are famous movie stars, for example, their words will be heard more so on a global scale. And where it comes to dark force characters that are highly placed within the controlling hierarchies throughout the simulator, should they step up, they are in positions to cause great waves through the connections they have and the greater ability and resources available to them than, say, your average human restricted slave. This would be one such woman, as though the real guides had identified her as potentially an individual who may at least listen to what I might share with her. Perchance she then does step up and commence with her own awareness process and prove to be a key asset, due to the influence she wields in the dark force circles she operates within. For the real guides, as part of the isness everything, as we all are, that animates through all consciousness, so all the ideas and intents any consciousness comprises of is available to the guides, and they can determine then those that are on the verge of stepping up, and either may approach them themselves, or deploy an agreeable new friend to connect with them. On this occasion, as I engaged with her, a dark-skinned and very strong-willed human female, I attempted to convey to her the real references, beginning with that which I impressioned she would most easily grasp, and then was my intention to proceed from there, as she was very literal an individual. However, she seemed to lack much by way of focus, to the extent that I was barely able to hold her attention for more than a few moments. DUANE has spoken of how, when engaging with the unaware on the real side, you can be standing directly before them and speaking with them, yet their eyes are flicking all over the scene, as though they are being distracted from multiple directions. This was a similar situation, and I have experienced such a response before, as though one's words are bouncing off the brick wall of their established consciousness of what they think life is. There are several real-side experiences I have shared previously where I too was guilty of a lack of a focus when in the company of DUANE or the guides, and on those occasions have such tactics been employed, including my being hosed with water and even having tomato sauce squirted all over me, which would somewhat reclaim my attention. I would attempt a similar method here, where I would have in my hand a selection of yogurts. I would proceed to tip them over the inattentive woman's head. This would indeed claim her attention, but perhaps not the way I was desiring. For what I managed to achieve was to send her into an almighty rage, which perhaps should have been anticipated, as after all she was a dark force being of some repute and standing. She would be unused to being the recipient of any kind of abuse, even if it was by a harmless dairy product. But as I said earlier, any attention we get is beneficial. We now have their focus upon us, and what they will see is us conducting ourselves with the purpose by which we are operating as in creation, the sharing of the is references. Although preferable would it be that she step up with the guides and DUANE, nevertheless this was the situation, the effects I had decided for myself, and the experience that would roll out from it. As I said, she was a woman of a great influence and positional power within the dark force hierarchies, and she would as though bring the entire weight of this influence to bear, by summoning an army of beings from one end of creation to the other. Their assigned objective was to eliminate me. All the beings deployed for my intended eradication seemed to have shape-shifting capability. I'm uncertain as to their primary body form and species, very likely reptilians, as they are renowned for having body form altering skills. What would take place then was a crazy pursuit across multi-dimensional creation, as I was hounded by this army of beings, as they constantly altered their forms, that they could be as formidable as possible. The personal self alone may have developed certain skills and abilities, like shape-shifting through the consciousness, as the reptilians clearly have. The real awareness, however, has unlimited capability, where its created forms and avatars interjected into experience on the real side are concerned. What limits the real awareness is ourselves, or rather the restrictions and limitations we hold to as agreement ideas in the consciousness. But as the process of awareness unfolds, as these ideas are released, so more so can the real awareness be unshackled and operate its body forms in whatever ways are required according to the circumstances. We are only as untouchable on the real side also as we decide to be. If we maintain agreements extended to our attackers, allowing that they can bestow harm upon us, as nothing can transpire between individuals without the shared agreement that it can, then they can indeed carry out their malicious intentions. Absent of such agreement, can they still decide to attempt my demise? But if the idea that can effect such a situation isn't present in my consciousness, this cannot be my simulated experience. And what occurs then on the real side will be the real awareness able to nullify the attacks we receive, through the lack of idea agreements that, were they present, would effect a shared simulated experience in which they would be successful with their abrasive actions. And how we put down our assailants can express in all manner of ways. In this case, as the minions of the dark force woman assailed me in the most monstrous shape-altered forms imaginable, I would do likewise, assuming forms that were far more formidable. This was a rather relentless situation. The irate woman was adamant that her minions persist until I was dispatched, and so the chase proceeded, periodically interspersed with moments of direct entanglement, looking a little like scenes from the Godzilla movies, where the various beasts attempt to destroy the main protagonist, the oversized lizard, but always are unsuccessful. During this situation, it was as though a number of other scenes cut into the main movie, so to speak, almost as though the equivalent of commercial breaks during the feature. In one scene, I would enter a particular area of creation, the scene of a red sky with the lightning arcing across it, standing in as though a stone temple of a kind would be 3 grey aliens, just as they are generally depicted, the large heads, almond black eyes, small fetus-like bodies. However, these beings, unlike my pursuers, were intending to step up, to become more aware, and I would engage with them. For new friend Jeremy has shared his interactions over the recent weeks with the Greys on the real side, and here I would be doing likewise. Although I fail to recollect the dialogue that took place, the overall impressions were that these 3 particular grey aliens wielded great influence among their kind, were extending a willingness to assist DUANE and the guides to step up and become more aware, and so again promising a consistency in regards to this particular body type. In another scene, another commercial break from the main feature of being chased across creation by an army of monsters, I would be walking down a passageway in a very technological type structure, the interior perhaps of a spacecraft or a space station. It seemed to be a station or ship full of various assorted alien body types. I appeared to have a business there, as I wasn't challenged as to my presence. The view was brief, but would involve another alien being passing me by in a corridor. I wouldn't even attempt to try and describe his body type. I have no references to apply, other than he walked on 2 legs. He would, however, communicate with me telepathically. He would proclaim how my energy frequencies were slightly misaligned, that will eventually affect through to the physical body as issues with my right eye. Everything does start on the real side. Everything we experience, including that which is adverse to the physical body, are agreements that we have decided upon and consciousness installed. That although instantly so in reality and revealed on the real side, the physical body and level presents somewhat a delay, due to the inclusion of the ideas of time and space present in the consciousness. But eventually these agreements, which effect as a physical debilitation, will become so on the physical level. And so this alien being was effectively eliminating the cause that would present the effect from becoming a physical level issue with my right eye. However that may have expressed were the cause not removed, a healing perhaps, and it's worth mentioning that if the idea agreement that effects as illness or disease is removed from us, generally the healer takes it on, like liberating a virus from one computer but taking it onto our own. And so then, for healers to operate without causing themselves harm, they need the ability to rid themselves from the transferred idea agreement. But ultimately, we endeavour to move into a position of self-responsibility, where we identify our own agreements, face and release them, and after all, if we heal another, yet the agreement that affects their illness is retained, likely then that the illness will return until they choose to release the idea which is affecting it. But anyway, this alien being seemed to know what he was doing. I had the impression he had the ability to in some way dissolve the idea agreements, the karma, that which he decides to take on through the healings he elects to provide. In a final commercial break scene from the main feature, I would be afforded the view of some kind of educational-like setting. Present would be a selection of robotic android body forms, and one in particular that was as though providing the lessons or information stood at the front of the classroom-like setting. As I watched, I realized all the robotic beings were as though intending to mimic precisely the body forms of certain Earth-based humans. My impressions were that the intentions of these particular robots were malign, and that they were to as though replace certain humans, that they could infiltrate and effect whatever changes they desired as a consequence. Every robot in the room had a different human they were intending to replicate, but the process either took a few moments, or my real awareness was able to see through the deceptive surface front, for the forms they were to assume were far from perfect. You could determine the humans they were set to replace, but wires, bits of metal and gadgetry were as though intermingled with the human form, reminding me a little of the Borg, appearance-wise, from Star Trek. But impressions revealed, ultimately these robots would be indistinguishable from the humans that presumably would be removed, vanished, etc. The idea was that with the placement of these replicas, so they could cause a disruption in whatever social or business circles the humans they were mimicking and replacing had operated within. Interestingly, the teacher at the front of the class would be assuming the form of one of my previous place of employment managers, so as though they were intending to replace humans throughout all spectrums of human systems. The robot that was assuming the form of my previous manager was teaching the robots lessons on how to conduct themselves, that not only are their forms perfect replicas, but the personalities, the attitudes, habits and inclinations of the humans they were set to replace would also be so precise that they would not be exposed as the fakes that they were. Then back with the main feature, and the relentless chase and monster battling continued. It was all becoming somewhat ridiculous, a situation with no end, the woman hell-bent on my destruction, and so I would remove myself from the ability of her monster shape-shifting army to pursue me any further, have a direct confrontation with the woman who was dictating their actions, and we would at least agree that this situation, if not concluded, could continue on indefinitely. Her creature army would never cease their hunt of me, and yet they were incapable of my destruction. And so she would capitulate, she would call off her monster army, and our paths would diverge. But like I said in the beginning, she may not express interest in her real awareness at that moment, but the guides had determined she was rather on the verge of doing so, that her real awareness perhaps was ready, but the little personal self had to be ignited into agreement with the real intent of his recognition also, and very likely her engaging with me may facilitate the igniting of this process for her, as I had showered her with real references, with yogurt too, and should she step up, the influence she has within the echelons of the dark forces will be positively impacting awareness speaking.